Hi, everyone. Good evening. This is Perspectives, a thought lead initiative by Kivani. Today, we'll be talking about the importance of lab safety. Specifically, we'll be covering how to convince others by creating an effective lab safety program without a purchase order or requisition. I'm also super excited today because we have some giveaways. 5 lucky winners will be chosen from the people attending the webinar today, and they get to win a free access to $600 worth of Safety in the Laboratory on-demand course created by the Laboratory Safety Institute. So stay tuned till the end to know about how it works. And for the webinar today, we have Dr. James Kaufman from the Laboratory Safety Institute, LSI. Jim is the founder and the president emeritus of the LSI, an international nonprofit center for safety in science, industry, and education. He was a 10-year member of the ACS Council Committee on Chemical Safety and is past chair of the ACS Division of Chemical Health and Safety. Jim has educated over 100,000 scientists and science educators in over 135 types of labs in 30 countries. Working for Dow, he authored laboratory safety guidelines. Over 6 million copies in 22 languages are in circulation of laboratory safety guidelines. Before I turn the stage to Jim, just a little housekeeping. Please stay on mute and don't raise your hands during the presentation. If you have any questions in your mind during the presentation, you will see a small Q&A box in your Zoom control panel. So just type your questions into them, and then I'll bring it up once the presentation is over during the dedicated Q&A session. Now, without further ado, let's turn our attention to Jim. Jim, thank you so much for joining us, and it's a great pleasure to have you with us today. So we are super eager to hear about your secret in terms of how to convince others on improving lab safety without a purchase order. So let's fire away. You can start sharing your presentation and then take over from here, Jim.
Good morning, everyone. Well, I guess it's morning for me. It's 7 a.m. here, but it's afternoon for you. So I'll say good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. Let me see if I can advance this. This is not, my screen is not, there we go. Okay. As Vijay said, I am the founder and president emeritus of the Laboratory Safety Institute. We are a small nonprofit organization for safety in science, science education, and our motto is teach, learn, and practice science safely. Now, during the COVID era, lab inspections and webinars and courses like this, as well as our on-demand courses that 5 of you are going to win thanks to Kivani. If you'd like more information about any of the things we do, I would be happy to share those with you. I'd like you to set aside a blank sheet of paper on which you can have what I like to call action ideas, so that you can write down some of the simple and inexpensive things that I'm going to suggest that you consider doing. For example, if you've never seen a video called Experimenting with Danger, which is the story about the death of Sherbano Sanji at UCLA in 2009, the death of Karen Wetterhahn at Dartmouth College in 1997, and the death and the injury to a 5th-year graduate student that cost him 3 fingers and punctured an eye at Texas Tech in 2010, I would urge you to go online to YouTube and look up Experimenting with Danger, or the US Chemical Safety Board website at csb.gov. That's an example of action ideas, something that you could do that doesn't require a purchase order or a requisition. That's number one. And I have this quote here from Jacob Riis because we're engaging in something here that I like to think of as a marathon. It's not a sprint. If you want to improve your lab safety program, it's going to have a lot of hits on the rock before you're going to be able to hatch that egg. Why do we have this problem? I think the reason is what I call the cycle of ignorance. We don't teach it early enough in schools, so young children don't learn the importance of it. They don't develop the safety knowledge. They don't acquire the safety ethic, and they graduate without the knowledge or the ethic, and then they become the science teachers, and the cycle is completed. I went to school for 25 years. And when I left school and went to work for the Dow Chemical Company, I learned more about safety in one day than I had in 25 years in school, scared the living daylights out of me. 43 years later, I went to a conference at NIH, and they had a panel there with somebody from Dow, somebody from DuPont, and somebody from BASF, and they asked them, are the people you hire today prepared to work up to your standard of safety? And the three answers were no, no, and that's right, no. So how are we going to get people convinced that safety is important if they're not learning it as they're growing up? Here's a simple way to evaluate how you're doing. It was developed by Sullivan and Kroll. Give yourself 0 points if you don't have any safety program at all. If you would like to do that, you can. It's easy and not that expensive. Maybe people tell you to go away. They say, I've been here for 35 years. I've never had a problem. Get out of my lab. That's worth a 0. If you react to accidents, sometimes only to go around and blame somebody for what happened, that's 1 point. And you go back to doing everything normal and forget about the accident. If you follow rules, policies, and regulations, we're making progress here. That's pretty good. And we'll give you 2 points for that. But remember, if the rules, policies, and regulations aren't in writing, you don't have them. What you have is called an oral tradition. And if they're not enforced, you don't have rules and policies and regulations. You have what's called lip service. You have to enforce the policies. If you have a management system, such as hazard analysis and pre-startup review, that's very good. That's good for 3 points. Do you measure the indicators? There are 2 kinds. There are leading indicators and lagging indicators. Lagging indicators are things that we keep track of after something has gone wrong. How many accidents did we have this year? How many of them were lost time accidents? How many days has it been since our last lost time accident? How many coffins did we have to buy? How many funeral eulogies did we present? Leading indicators are the things we do in advance to prevent or make less likely having accidents. For example, inspecting labs, having a safety committee, having safety presentations, training. These are the kinds of things that are relatively inexpensive, generally don't require a purchase order, and they make it less likely that accidents are going to happen. Let's track both leading and lagging indicators. And finally, you get the top score if you've made safety a core value. It's integral and important at your place. And we'll talk more about what that means. Integral and important. The American Chemical Society made it integral and important by making it a core value in their strategic plan. And they said, nobody's going to get an ACS National Award if we don't take into account their safety performance. And you can't publish a paper in one of our journals if you don't include the safety information. There is a chemical chapter, an international chapter of the American Chemical Society in India, and I'm looking forward to working with them to provide a webinar for that group as well. So how do we improve our safety program, whether you're starting from scratch or you have a highly developed program? The goal is to go from good to better to best and keep improving, little bit at a time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So we want to create more effective lab safety programs in order to convince people that safety is important. But what is a lab safety program? LSI likes to say it's a planned group of activities, functions, and practices which take place regularly to address your health and safety needs. We've created a list of 33 elements that we feel are the important elements in a good safety program. And I'll be happy to send anyone a copy of this review form. There's all 33. Anyone who would like a copy, just write to jim@labsafety.org, and I'll be happy to send it to you. You can use this either qualitatively or quantitatively. To use it qualitatively, just put a check mark in the appropriate column. Okay, needs work, doesn't exist. Pretty straightforward. Interesting, when I go over this with organizations and we do it together, someone in the group will say it's okay, and someone else in the same group at the same company will say it doesn't exist. And that's really interesting because there's obviously a knowledge gap about what's going on with this particular element. If there are any elements on the list that you'd like more explanation about, write it into the question box, and at the end, we'll address it. If we don't get to all the questions, I'm going to be following up with all the questions that remained unanswered. If you want to do it semi-quantitatively, you can count the number of check marks in each of the columns, and obviously you'd like 33 okays and 0 do not exist. And if you like a score out of 100, you're used to scoring 100 on your quizzes, your exams in school, and you want 100 on this one, give yourself 3 points for everything that's okay, 0 to 3 if it needs additional work, and 0 if it doesn't exist. And since we've got 33, 3 times 33 is 99, and I'm going to give you a bonus point for having the courage to do this quantitatively, and you'll have a score out of 100. I also have what I call the Excel scorecard, and it has for each of these elements the criteria that we've identified, and as you score on a 0 to 6 point scale, you end up having it automatically average, and you grade yourself using each of the elements that are involved. And 6 is outstanding and 0 does not exist. And I'm happy to share this with anyone who'd like a copy of it, and also to talk about working together with you to get this completed and do this kind of evaluation of your lab safety program if you're interested. And anybody who'd like to spend a little time on Zoom looking at that checklist with your colleagues and chatting about it and how to use it, I'm happy to volunteer to do that. So life is full of choices. There are 3 C's to safety, 3 words that begin with the letter C that help us to understand what this is all about. Life is full of choices. Lucy says that. Here's an example of choices. Here's a flammables cabinet. And this was in the Middle East. I was looking at this flammables cabinet, and on the side of the cabinet, there was a little piece of metal hanging there. And I said to the folks, what is that? And they explained it to me. And I said, well, what else does it do? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, oh, this is probably a language issue. English is not the native language. So I said to myself, I'll ask it differently. I said, what's its second purpose? And they said, what do you mean? And I went, oh, maybe it's not a language issue. Well, I explained it to them, and I came back to the United States, and I went to Cornell University, I went to Ohio Wesleyan, I went to Green River College, and I went to MIT. And I asked 100 folks, what is this and what's its second purpose? Only 50% knew that it's used to hold the door open. And there's this little metal post up here. Let's see, right up there. And this hole goes over that metal post and it holds the door open. And zero out of 100 knew that this is a safety device called a fusible link, and it's designed to melt at 165 degrees Celsius. So the door will close automatically on a spring-loaded door, and it's a safety device. Well, life is full of choices. You're not free to choose unless you know what the choices are. And so they weren't really free to choose. Now, if you choose to throw it at me, I'm going to pound you right into the ground. And if you don't, your head will be spared, because he's got this snowball that he's thinking of throwing at her. And at the end, he says, life is full of choices, but you never get any. And the person's best prepared to choose will know the likely outcomes. It turns out that that piece of metal broke at this company, and they replaced it with one that they machined out of aluminum. Because they didn't understand what it was, they completely defeated the safety purpose of it. Life is full of choices, and choices have consequences. This young lady was a senior physics astronomy major at Yale University in 2011. Her name is Michelle Default. And she was working alone at 2 a.m. in the chemistry department machine shop by herself. And as you can see, she has long hair. It was tied back in a ponytail, and it got caught in the lathe that she was using, and she was killed. What does it take to convince people to care? How do we convince people to care? And I believe part of the answer is having a really good safety program with all of those elements done to the very best of your ability. Over the last 40 plus years, the one question that comes up over and over again is, when I ask people, why are you here? They'll say, I care about this, but what about my colleagues who aren't here? How do I convince them to care? And these elements, these 33 elements in a good safety program, all contribute to this, getting people to care. I'm going to emphasize just a couple of them in the time that we have. This webinar actually is a small portion of a one-day course called Developing a More Effective Lab Safety Program, where we discuss all of these elements. I think the most important one is the new employee safety orientation. When I started working at Dow, I told you this, my supervisor, Don Dix, spent the whole first day doing nothing but talking about safety. My safety orientation came on day one, and it was provided by my immediate supervisor. So my question for the 85 of you who are here is, when you started working for your current employer, how many of you had your immediate supervisor sit down with you on the first day that you were with him or her, and they provided an introduction to working safely in his or her research group? I've asked that question of over 100,000 people, and only 5% say yes. We need to do much, much better than that. I think this is the single most important component in a good safety plan. HR can do everything they like. That's good. The safety department can do everything they like. That's good. And then that new employee moves to their supervisor who says, Jim, I'm glad you're here. In the room next door, we've got 600 samples, and we need to get them analyzed by Friday. If we don't, we're in big trouble. So you're welcome to work late here if you need to. You can come in by yourself and work late in the lab. But we've got to get this done. And oh, by the way, I've got this safety thing I'm supposed to do with you, but it's going to have to wait. What has your supervisor just done? Taken a sickle and gone, whoop, and taken the legs right out from underneath the lab safety program and made it very clear that making widgets is more important than your health and safety. So let's make up a 4-part carbonless form, and let's have the items on that orientation filled out. All the things that the supervisor needs to talk about and checked off as you go. And when the supervisor's done, the new employee signs it, the supervisor signs it, you both date it. The employee gets a copy, the supervisor gets a copy. The third copy goes to the HR department, who will now use it as a leading indicator how many of our new people hired anywhere in the organization, a president, a secretary, a custodian, a dean of the college, a lab manager, everybody gets this orientation done. And how many get it on day one, the first day they're with their immediate super. The fourth copy goes up the food chain one level to the supervisor's supervisor. And her job or his job is to find that new employee within 1 week, invite them for a cup of coffee, sit down, welcome them, and re-emphasize the importance of safety working with them, your supervisor, and in this group. That's critical. Now, here's something that's stunning, and this is perhaps one of the biggest secrets of all. Having the immediate supervisor do this, I said, was 5% of 100,000 people who I've asked. Watch this one. I had a meeting with the chemistry department chairs from all the colleges and universities in the Southeast United States. And I asked them, how many of you interview candidates that would like a job in your department? And I knew the answer. The answer was going to be all of them. And they all put their hands up. I knew that. So then I asked them question number 2. How many of you have ever asked a candidate the lab safety question? And they looked at each other, puzzled, and they looked at me. And finally, somebody said, what's the lab safety question? And I said, what have you done in the past that's going to help you to be contributing more effectively to our group, our department, our company's lab safety program? You know what the answer was? That's right, 0, not 1. So I just kind of said, well, okay. And I've asked this on many occasions, and the answer is very, very similar. And I would ask all of you, if you do interview people, to think about how many of you may have ever asked a candidate that question. You know, if you want to grow a culture of safety, it might not be a bad idea to only hire people who care about this and not people who don't happen to care. Over here on the bookcase, I have a friend of mine. I'll get my colleague. I'll be right back. He's right over here. Here he comes. Look out. He's here. He's a rat. This is a lab rat. This is Lab Safety Institute's lab rat. And I'm fond of saying that there are some people who I nickname them Dr. Wilson. That's my nickname, who don't happen to give a rat's you know what about lab safety. They just don't care. And organizations say to me, we're improving our lab safety program one retirement at a time. And they're referring to the retirement of Dr. Wilson. Well, okay, but do it at both ends. Hire people who care in the interview process. Incidentally, this is a small reward that we give out to when we do leadership and safety for organizations. I give this to the head of the organization. It's a LSI's lab safety rat. And what it says is, we don't give a rat's rear for safety, we give the whole rat. Congratulations, you've just been ratted on for working safely. Now it's your turn to rat on someone else. So this is a small reward. And if we want to have a good safety program, we need a balance of what we call carrots, rewards, and sticks, discipline. And this is a very small way of saying thank you to someone. Of course, the simplest, least expensive reward you can give an employee that doesn't require a purchase order or a requisition is to say thank you for doing a good job. And I would ask you to think about, how do you reward good safety performance in your department? Put it in the job description. Do you all have an annual job review? Is there a written form that lists the topics that are going to be covered in the job review? Is lab safety, safety performance, one of the items on the list? At the Dow Chemical Company, it was on the list of 10 items. And guess where it was on the list? That's right, it was number 1. You can say something about your priorities for safety in the workplace by where you put it on the job description and in the job performance review. And you can also, if you want, put it into the classified ad when you're advertising for someone, whether it's a virtual online ad, add 2 words, safety conscious, wanted, safety conscious scientist. The second thing that happened at Dow was that my boss handed me the Dow Central Research Safety Manual and said, here, Jim, over the last 100 years, we've written down how we like people to do things in our lab. Take this home tonight and read it, because this is the way we want you to do it. These are our rules and policies for working safely in our labs, and we expect you to do it this way. Well, okay, ask any questions you like tomorrow when you come back, because this is the way we want you to do it. And it needs to be in writing. The policies need to be in writing. We don't want oral traditions. It needs to be readily accessible. It needs to be reviewed at least annually, and anytime something doesn't go the way it's supposed to go, it should be reviewed. And the policies must be enforced. I'm doing a lab safety manual review currently for the Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical Company in Indianapolis. This is the second time they've had me review the document. It's 150 pages long. And one of the things that I fell in love with when I read it the first time is they have a glossary in the front. And there are two words in the glossary you might not normally expect to find in a lab safety manual: must and should. And it explains them. Must means you have no discretionary authority. It shall be done this way. And should means we strongly recommend you do this, but you do have the ability to do it differently if you feel it's better that way. So the musts have to have consequences. There needs to be a clear discipline procedure, because after all of the training and coaching and mentoring have taken place, if Jim doesn't seem to be able to get with the program, we need to be able to move to a discipline procedure, a fair, orderly, published in the HR manual discipline procedure, perhaps with an official verbal warning, followed by an official written warning, and then a paid decision-making leave of absence to decide whether you want to resign or sign an agreement that if you don't follow the rule, the next time you're going to be terminated. And number 4, you get terminated. It's not personal. You want to play on our team, you're going to play by our rules. Otherwise, if you don't enforce rules, you don't have rules. You have lip service. And rules really are these monuments, like you see here in the slide. There's a rest in peace tombstone. If you want to see more of these tombstones, you can look on our website on the home page, and as you scroll down, you'll see it says Lab Safety Matters, and there are some pictures and a few words about people who have died in lab accidents. And if you click on what says the memorial wall, you'll find the names of over 500 people from all over the world, including India, who have died as the result of laboratory accidents. That's the very dark side of this, and thousands of disabling injuries. We have to have rules. My boss at Dow said, Jim, if you want to do it differently, take your idea to the Lab Safety Committee. Does your organization have a Lab Safety Committee? And if they approve it, they'll put it in the manual, and then we'll all do it that way. The committee needs to meet regularly, and I think monthly is a good interval for this. The membership should rotate. If you have 30 people working in your lab, how about taking 6 and making them the members? And having 6 alternates. So if the member can't go, they're on vacation, they're sick, they're attending a training program or a convention, the alternate goes. And after the first year, every 2 months, the member goes off, the alternate takes over, and a new alternate is appointed. Now with 30 people, that's going to be 6 a year. That's going to take 5 years for everybody to serve. You see, it isn't something that Jim and VJ and Raj do because we think this is fun and important, and we'll let the other folks do the important stuff, the science. No, this is integral and it's important and it's part of who we are and what we do. And you don't need a purchase order or a requisition to get everybody involved in this. In fact, you don't need a purchase order or a requisition to develop that new employee safety orientation. At the next staff meeting, why don't you give out a blank sheet of paper? Better yet, get the supervisor of the group, the leader of the group, to give out a blank sheet of paper, because we like to say the dog sled can't go any faster than the lead dog. The senior management, the upper management has to be involved. Give out a blank sheet of paper. Ask people to write down what are the 10 most important things a new employee should know about working safely if they're going to be in our group. Let's suppose your group has 10 people working in that group. Okay, the head of the group ends up with 10 sheets of paper with 10 items, 100 suggestions. She or he can rank order them and build what we call the David Letterman top 10 list. And at the next meeting, give everybody a copy of the whole thing, rank ordered with the counts, and assign one to each of the 10 people and say, okay, for the next 10 months, we're going to talk about these things. Or at the next meeting, I want you all 10 of you, to talk for 2 minutes about what's important with this particular item. So what happens? The supervisor doesn't tell them what's important. The supervisor lets the employees tell the supervisor what they believe is important. And the supervisor doesn't train them, they train the supervisor. And what has the supervisor done? They've gotten everybody involved in safety in several staff meetings. And this is the goal. Every time the group gets together, safety is going to be on the agenda in some way. So it rotates and everybody eventually participates. And we also want to have what's called a central safety committee. And this is a DuPont model where the highest ranking person in that location and their direct reports, they end up with getting together probably every week to talk about what's going on. And once a month, they should put on their hard hats and talk about safety issues at their level, the senior management level. We've got to get the leaders being in charge of this and having it radiate downward. Item number 4, and it's number 26 on your list of 33, is the rules agreement. My boss said to me, Jim, when you come back tomorrow morning, day 2 at Dow, sign the manual in the front where it says, I've read it, I understand it, and I agree to follow these policies and procedures. And I wasn't a sophomore in high school. I wasn't a sophomore in college. I was a PhD with 2 years of postdoctoral experience signing the same kind of rules agreement that I'm hoping your children in your schools and colleges need to sign, and that you had to sign when you were a school student and a college student. Do you have a rules agreement at your place? Well, what I've learned is that everybody needs to be signing this. Some of you may be working at an academic institution, and you may be using this for your undergraduates to have them sign. Do you expect the faculty at these institutions to be the role models for the children? Of course we do. Do we ask them to sign that same rules agreement? Most often not. I would say less than 5% have the faculty and staff sign a similar rules agreement. Does your company have a rules agreement? You could do the same kind of activity I was describing, only the question would be, what are the 10 most important rules that you expect everyone to follow, or you'd really rather they not be working here with you? Well, okay. And then you rank order them and you take off the top the conference all-stars and you make a rules agreement out of it. And I've learned that 3 parts is not enough. Read, understood, and agree is good, but best is to add the realize. And the realize says, and I realize that if I don't follow these rules, it can cost me the privilege of being here. That's right, you can be terminated for failure to follow the safety rules. If that's not in place, you will not have the best safety program. And having it there serves as an important indicator of how seriously management takes compliance. Provide a cover letter. Have the president of the organization, very high-ranking person, provide a cover letter that goes with the rules agreement, that welcomes everybody, that says, we want you to be safe, we've created rules, and here are the consequences for not following the rules. And make it crystal clear right from the get-go when people are interviewing for a job that this is the way it works here. If you do have a rules agreement and you haven't looked at it in a long time, I like to say, maybe now's a good time to take it out and renew your vows. See what you said you're supposed to do. And this is for management and employees. It's the same thing. There are 4 simple questions. What are the hazards? What can go wrong? What do you need to do to be prepared? And what are the prudent practices, protective equipment? That is item 11. Vijay mentioned the, let's see, how can I show this to you? The lab safety guidelines. These are the 40 suggestions for a safer lab that I wrote when I was at Dow. I'll be happy to send you a copy of this. And if you'd like it in Hindi or Bengali, we can do that too, or any of 22 other languages. All you have to do is request it. And being able to answer these 4 simple questions is really important before you do anything. Well, effective safety programs take caring about your own health and safety and the health and safety of the people around you. I think that's why my boss at Dow spent the whole first day doing nothing but talking about safety. It has to be integral. It can't be something extra. It's just got to be part of doing the job right. Cleaning up, leaving the lab better than you found it. Having safety drills as part of the general conduct of what's going on. And yes, there it is. We need rewards. Thank yous don't cost anything. The rat is $4.95. But we also need discipline. And we need to enforce the rules. There have to be consequences. Everybody gets careless. Everybody gets forgetful. We all need reminders from time to time. And that's why webinars like this, training programs, staff meetings that cover safety, very, very important. And lastly, participation. There's no magic to this. It's not like pulling a rabbit out of hats to have a better safety program. But there are 4 magic words. I need your help. I need you to take those action ideas and the things we've talked about today and work on implementing them. And if there's anything that we can do, that the Lab Safety Institute can do to help you with this, as we did at the Indian Institute of Technology, II Chemical Technology, IICT, or at the Indian Institute of Science, we would be delighted to provide assistance to you as well. You can make an incredible difference in your own health and safety and the health and safety of the people you care about by the time and energy you put into this. That's the good news. The bad news is, however, you're never going to be done because this is a huge challenge, but it's worth it because no less learn and practice science safely. Thank you very much for joining me today. And Vijay, I'll turn it back over to you for the questions.
Jim, splendid. Thank you so much.
I'll stop sharing now. Let's see, how do I do that? No, that's not it. Share, no, stop sharing. There it is, got it.
All right, wonderful. Jim, thank you so much. That was splendid. So what I got to learn is safety is not just a responsibility, but it's also a right, because it's important to care about the safety of the others. Let's jump into the Q&A session. There are quite a bit of questions around. Please send the checklist and the brochure that you talked about in terms of the lab safety guides. Instead of answering each one, so all the attendees of the training will get a copy of it. So we will share the checklist and the guide with you. So don't worry about that. Now, there is one question which has come from Keshav Shrestha. And his question is, what are the table of contents in safety manual?
Okay. Well, what's the table of contents? One way to answer that question is to ask our friend, Dr. Google, who's very knowledgeable about many of these things. And if you were to type in lab safety manual, you'll probably find 100,000 examples of different ways that people have done this. And I would suggest that you need to think about the last 4 questions that I was asking. What are the hazards? You want to address all the hazards that are present in your workplace. Life has 9 hazards: chemical, physical, biological, mechanical, noise, radiation, high-low pressure, electrical, and stress. These are life's 9 hazards. When we take the time to be able to identify them, recognize them, and decide how we're going to protect ourselves by putting in control measures like elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and personal protective equipment to address all of the hazards that are present. And then what can go wrong? What are the kinds of things? What are the types of emergencies? And how do we get prepared to deal with them? And how are we going to respond if it does happen? And what are the prudent practices, protective equipment, protective facilities needed to minimize the risk? We can't make the risk go to 0. If you would like a poster that has those 4 questions on it, it's available for free on the LSI website. If you look in the labsafety.org at the shop, you go to posters, and I believe on the second, there are 6 posters there that are free, and one of them is the 4 questions.
All right. The next is compliment from David MB. It's a very nice session. Safety is a responsibility. We'll implement those. In fact, it's words like these that we're looking at, people taking away what they learned in the session and then putting it into implementation in their workplaces. So good luck with your initiative, Devaki. There's a question from Tegu Gumilar. I hope I'm getting the name right. Very interesting question. How to teach the lab safety effectively for the secondary school students?
It needs to be introduced to them at a level appropriate for them. We have a publication entitled Safety is Elementary, the New Standard for Safety in the Elementary Science Classroom. We also have some publications for the high school level. The NIOSH, the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health in the US, they developed a safety training program for safety in the secondary school science laboratory, and that was the beginning of our initiatives to do this. We were teaching for the first 10 years to school science teachers, and we still do teach to school science teachers and school science groups. I'm currently working with the Ministry of Education in Egypt to develop safety programs for their STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math schools. They have a dozen schools for this. And so we're working with them on developing a safety curriculum for them. I can send you, if you write to me, I can send you some links and some other ideas on how to do this.
All right. Sunil Joshi, he wants to know if you can conduct a similar 1-hour program for his executives and the management, people in the management. So you can all write to jim@labsafety.org. So if there are some training programs that you want Jim to conduct, so
Yeah, let me just add one point here. We do have a program which is called Leadership and Safety, and it was developed to help senior management and senior administrators have a clearer understanding of their critical role in developing a more effective organization-wide safety program, not just lab safety, but the whole organization. And we have a webinar coming up. I believe it's on the 26th of March on leadership in safety. When is that? Webinars. Yeah, March 26th. And you can register online for that webinar if you want. And that's the 1-hour version of it. And there is also a 4-hour version that we like to deliver. We've done this for vice presidents at companies, presidents of companies, presidents of colleges and universities, and their direct reports.
All right. Couple of questions. Again, one more from Keshav Shrestha. Is risk assessment in ISO 17025 2017 path to safety requirements? Is it too specific for the Indian context, or how
is risk assessment a path?
in
Risk,
ISO
yes,
17
risk, yes. This is a very good ISO standard, and it will also be very helpful in thinking through and working to implement those kinds of practices in your organization. It is a good thing to follow.
All right. Mopi Devi, Pavan, Saikumar. The question is how to teach the lab safety effectively for uneducated workers who are working in pharmaceutical industries and labs.
Yes, it is good to have very specific procedures and practices so that people really understand what's going on. I had a call from a colleague in the Middle East one time. He said, should I fire him? And I said, what happened? He said, he took his chemical reaction from the lab into the lunchroom and ran it in the lunchroom microwave. I never would have imagined that somebody would have thought to do this. And I said, no, did you have a sign on the microwave that said food use only? He said, no. I said, put the sign up. I said, did you have in the safety manual, chemical reactions are only run in the laboratory unless you have prior approval? He said, no. I said, put it in the manual. And when you've done that, then let them know that if they don't do it this way, they're going to be fired. So I think management, for people who are learning for the first time how to do these things, you need to go at this the same way you might teach a child to ride a bicycle. Very slowly, have the training wheels on, do the processes and make sure they can do them if they're handling hazardous materials, that they have the techniques and the skills to handle them safely before they start using the hazardous materials, and have those procedures in writing and observe them doing it. They see you do it, you see them do it, they do it.
Okay, I've got time for two more. I'll pick up a question from Sunil Kumar. The question is, how much time is to be spent on lab safety training for a new research scholar?
I guess it depends a little bit on what their background is in this. When Amy Betts joined Dow Chemical Research Division in Midland, Michigan, they gave her a desk, they gave her a chair, and they gave her a safety manual. And they said, Amy, read the manual for 2 weeks, study this manual for 2 weeks. And at the end of 2 weeks, we're going to give you an exam. If you pass the exam, you can go into the laboratory and start working in the lab. But they wanted to be very, very sure she understood the policies and procedures in their safety manual. I'm not sure I could give you a more specific time.
Sure, I mean, if there's anything specific which people are looking for, they can always write to you. The email
Yes,
ID, could you repeat your email address, Jim?
it is jim@labsafety.org.
So jim@labsafety.org.
Yes.
Yeah, so people who are looking for some sort of guidance or brochures, they can reach out to you direct.
Yes.
Okay,
Please.
the final question for you. I think your rat analogy has caught on. So Devik Ambi says, rat is very interesting what you showed in session. Need more information on how to implement in industry.
Well, the question, the rat concept is really to just get at the issue of providing some reward for good safety performance. And there is no one right way to do it. But if you had a larger organization and you were doing lab inspections, and some companies are so large that it would take a year to go and view all of the labs, for the safety department to go around and view all the labs. And every time they show up, somebody is saying, oh no, not those people again. They're here to tell us what we're doing wrong. How about every time you do a lab inspection, you find something to compliment people on for doing it right, and let it be a mix of praise for the things that are well done and suggestions for improving the things that are opportunities for improvement. And if you have a large number of labs, every month, pick the one lab that you visited that month that has the best job, and have management send them a thank you letter. At the end of the year, take all 12 winners and have the president of the company invite all 12 winners and everyone who works in those 12 labs to a luncheon and let the president say thank you to them for doing a good job. Find a way that works for your organization to be thankful for people who are following the rules, cleaning up, and doing a good job with this. Don't just let it be bad, 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 slapping wrists for people who don't get it right.
All right, so we are pretty much at the time limit. You know, people will start slapping our wrists if we overrun any further. With that, Jim, thank you so much. It was indeed a wonderful and informative session. I got to know quite a bit about lab safety and what needs to be done. That's excellent. I'm sure people are all waiting for to know about the giveaways that we talked about. So I'll just share the information in terms of how it's going to work. So whoever has attended the webinar, you do stand a chance to win the $600 worth of safety in the laboratory course. So this is an on-demand course, so you don't have to sort of work around the timelines of the course, but anytime you're free to watch it, you can watch it. So we will be randomly selecting 5 lucky winners from the attendees today. And we will set up their login details for the course and then share the details with them. So there's one way in which you can know when we announce it is by following our LinkedIn. In case you haven't done so far, please follow us on LinkedIn, which is just type in Kivani and then you can follow Kivani International Group. So that's where we will be announcing all the lucky winners' names very shortly. So just stay tuned for this and then we will let you know who gets to win these 5 giveaways.
May I say a word or two about the courses?
Please, please.
Yes. These on-demand, one-day on-demand courses are our lab safety, one-day lab safety in the lab introductory course. And you have a full semester to complete the course. You will be getting a login and an ID. So you can do this. There are quizzes with each section of the course. If you decide to complete the course for a certificate of successful completion, then you need to get at least a score of 70% on all of the topics in the course. There are about a dozen topics in the course, and I'm the instructor. And if you have questions during the course, we can Skype, we can Zoom, we can do phone calls or emails to discuss anything that's going on in the course that you have a question about. All the course materials are contained there.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Jim. So with that, we will bring this webinar to a close and we will announce the winners of the giveaways very shortly. So please follow us on LinkedIn, and also LinkedIn will give you information about the future webinars. So thank you everyone for joining us. Jim, thank you so much.
Thank Kivani. Thank you, Vijay.
Well, it was a pleasure hosting you. It was indeed a wonderful session. So thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. So this is Perspectives, a thought leader initiative by Kivani. Thank you and good evening. Bye-bye.